Shalom, I hope you all are doing well. I'm blessed and I'm back again with a quick video. As you can see, we're going to be talking about the go along to get along society. In case you didn't know, there are families where truth is forbidden, where everyone leans to survive by pretending. Nobody addresses the manipulation, nobody confronts lies, and nobody protects targeted people. Because in the go along to get along society, peace is not built on righteousness, it's built on silence. In toxic family systems, there are rules nobody says out loud. Don't expose the dysfunction. Don't question the manipulator. Don't have boundaries. Don't tell the truth if the truth makes people uncomfortable. Everybody learns their roles. One becomes the scapegoat. One becomes the enabler. One becomes the silent observer. And one becomes the controller who manipulates emotions to keep the family orbiting around chaos. The dysfunction becomes normal because it has existed for generations. In toxic family systems, the control is often psychological, emotional, and spiritual long before anyone recognizes that it's unhealthy. The reason it becomes so difficult to identify is because the dysfunction is wrapped inside familiarity. People mistake repetition for normalcy. If something's been happening since childhood, the mind stops questioning it and starts adapting to survive it. The unspoken rule becomes a foundation of the family culture. And don't expose the dysfunction becomes a collective agreement, meaning appearance becomes more important than healing. The family may look united in public, smile at gatherings, celebrate holidays together, and defend each other outwardly, while privately there's manipulation, emotional neglect, jealousy, intimidation, gossip, or constant tension underneath the surface. The image must be protected at all costs. Anyone who speaks honestly about what is happening is often labeled disrespectful, dramatic, rebellious, or divisive, because truth threatens the structure that everyone has adapted to. And do not question the manipulator, because this is where fear enters the system. In many toxic families, one person controls the emotional climate of the household, and everyone learns to monitor that person's mood, reactions, tone, and approval. People walk on eggshells without even realizing it. Conversations become filtered. Authenticity disappears. Instead of asking what is right, people begin asking, how do I avoid conflict? The manipulator may use guilt, silent treatment, victimhood, anger, favoritism, financial control, or emotional outbursts to maintain power. And over time, the family unconsciously organizes itself around keeping that individual comfortable. Another hidden rule is don't have boundaries. In healthy relationships, boundaries are respected because love understands individuality. In toxic systems, boundaries are viewed as betrayal. The moment someone says no, asks for space, protects their peace, refuses to participate in gossip, or stops tolerating disrespect, the system reacts. But why? Because boundaries expose unhealthy access. Toxic environments often depend on emotional outreach, access to your time, emotions, privacy, energy, and decisions. When boundaries appear, the dysfunction loses control. So the person who's setting the boundaries is often punished through guilt, exclusion, criticism, or character assassination. Next up is don't tell the truth if it makes people uncomfortable. This creates generational denial. Children raised in these environments learn early that honesty is dangerous. They may see obvious dysfunction, but are trained to suppress their discernment in order to maintain peace in the family. This creates adults who second-guess themselves, ignore red flags, tolerate mistreatment, and feel guilty for confronting harmful behavior. The silence becomes inherited, and entire generations may protect wounds they never healed, simply because no one wants to confront the pain directly. And over time, everybody adapts by unconsciously taking roles that keep the system functioning. The scapegoat is usually the one who notices the dysfunction first or refuses to fully conform to it. This person often becomes blamed for the family tension because toxic systems need someone to carry the weight of unresolved issues. Instead of addressing the actual dysfunction, the family projects problems onto the scapegoat. Ironically, the scapegoat is often the truth teller, the emotionally aware one, or the person trying to break unhealthy cycles. The enabler protects the dysfunction by minimizing it. They excuse harmful behavior with phrases like, "That's just how they are." "Keep the peace." "Family is family." You know how they get. Their role is not always malicious. Many enablers learn survival through appeasement. But by constantly protecting unhealthy behavior from consequences, they unintentionally help the cycle continue. The silent observer sees what's happening, but says little or nothing. Sometimes this role develops out of fear, exhaustion, or years of feeling powerless. Silence becomes a coping mechanism. The observer may avoid conflict entirely, emotionally detach, or pretend not to notice obvious problems because involvement feels dangerous. Then there's the controller, the person around whom the emotional system revolves. This individual may create confusion, division, guilt, competition, or instability while presenting themselves as misunderstood, authoritative, or even loving. They may alternate between kindness and cruelty, affection and punishment, creating emotional unpredictability that keeps others psychologically attached and constantly seeking approval. What makes these systems so powerful is that the dysfunction becomes normalized through repetition. Children born into chaos often cannot identify chaos because they have never experienced peace. Emotional instability becomes familiar. Manipulation becomes interpreted as love. Control becomes mistaken for protection. Hypervigilance becomes normal daily life. And because these patterns are passed down generation after generation, many people inherit emotional wounds they did not create. Some families pass down unresolved trauma like an inheritance, fear, rage, silence, shame, control, favoritism, emotional neglect, until someone finally becomes aware enough to confront the cycle. Usually the person who starts healing is the one the system resists the most. Because once one person begins telling the truth, setting boundaries, refusing manipulation, and stepping out of unhealthy roles, the entire family structure is forced to confront what it has normalized for years. The enemy understands something many people do not fully recognize. If he cannot destroy your purpose directly, he will often work through emotionally unhealthy relationships to slowly weaken you over time. Not always through obvious attacks, but through constant emotional exhaustion, confusion, guilt, drama, distraction, and psychological pressure, because a distracted mind struggles to focus and a drained spirit struggles to discern clearly. Sometimes the greatest warfare is not an external attack. It is being surrounded by environments that constantly pull you out of peace. The enemy knows that purpose requires clarity. It requires emotional stability, and it requires discernment, discipline, and spiritual focus. So if he can keep a person emotionally entangled in cycles of chaos, conflict, people-pleasing, manipulation, or constant family drama, then that person spends more time surviving emotionally than walking fully in their calling. This is why some people feel mentally exhausted after every interaction with certain individuals. Their energy is constantly being pulled into arguments, guilt trips, misunderstandings, accusations, emotional instability, or unresolved tension. Instead of producing fruit, they spend their lives managing emotional fires that never stop burning. And many people stay trapped because they were taught that every family connection is automatically righteous simply because it's biological. But blood relation alone does not automatically produce healthy fruit. Some relationships produce peace, wisdom, support, accountability, healing, and growth, while other relationships consistently produce anxiety, fear, confusion, emotional heaviness, manipulation, control, competition, jealousy, guilt, intimidation, or exhaustion. And when a relationship continually damages a person's emotional and spiritual well-being without repentance or change, that dysfunction cannot simply be ignored. Toxic systems especially struggle with individuals who begin seeking truth, healing, and self-awareness, because truth threatens the illusion the system was built on. The moment someone begins asking difficult questions, setting boundaries, confronting unhealthy patterns, or refusing to participate in dysfunction, the family system often reacts defensively. Suddenly, the person seeking peace is labeled the problem. The one who's trying to heal becomes accused of changing, thinking they're better, causing division, or breaking the family apart. But why? Because unhealthy systems depend on agreement, silence, and compliance to survive. Truth forces hidden things into the light, and once people begin to see clearly, manipulation loses its power. And this is why toxic environments often attack the person who starts waking up emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. That person disrupts the cycle. Their growth exposes what everyone else normalized. Their boundaries expose unhealthy access. Their honesty exposes denial. Their healing exposes wounds that others may still be avoiding. And many toxic systems would rather protect the illusion of peace than confront the actual dysfunction destroying the family underneath the surface. The tragedy is that many people spend years trying to earn love from people who only know how to function through control, guilt, fear, or emotional dependency. They keep sacrificing their peace, hoping the relationship will finally become healthy, while the cycle quietly continues repeating itself. But healing often begins the moment a person realizes this: not every relationship is sent to nurture your purpose. Some relationships exist to test whether you will abandon your peace, discernment, boundaries, and identity just to maintain unhealthy connections. And sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stop normalizing what has been destroying them for years. I know what's really sad? When a person begins healing, finding peace, and walking in clarity, it often exposes how much darkness, confusion, and emotional instability existed all around them before. And this is why your growth can disturb people who were comfortable with a version of you that was wounded, silent, exhausted, or easier to control. Some people are not disturbed because you harmed them. They're disturbed because you stopped participating in the dysfunction that benefited them. Your peace becomes uncomfortable to people who are used to chaos. Your boundaries become offensive to people who relied on unlimited access to you. Your silence becomes threatening to people who fed off of conflict. And your healing becomes a mirror that forces others to confront what they have avoided within themselves. In toxic systems, people often grow accustomed to certain roles. They expect you to remain the emotional caretaker, the scapegoat, the rescuer, the people pleaser, or the person who absorbs disrespect without resistance. So when you begin to change, the system reacts because your transformation interrupts the emotional structure everyone adapted to. The moment you stop arguing, stop over-explaining yourself, stop chasing validation, stop reacting emotionally, and stop allowing manipulation to pull you into confusion, some people begin feeling powerless around you, not because you became cruel, but because their old methods no longer work. And that can deeply frustrate individuals who were emotionally dependent on controlling the atmosphere around you. There are people who feel more comfortable when you are struggling, not always consciously, not always intentionally, but your brokenness made them feel secure. When you lacked confidence, they felt superior. When you were emotionally wounded, they could guide your decisions. When you constantly sought approval, they maintained influence. And when you tolerated disrespect, they remained stable. But peace changes a person. The healed person becomes harder to manipulate because they no longer confuse guilt with love. They no longer mistake control for protection, and they no longer tolerate behavior that destroys their mental and spiritual well-being, and they stop shrinking themselves just to make dysfunctional people comfortable. This is why your quietness can bother people. Your joy can bother people. Your detachment from drama can bother people. Even your happiness can irritate individuals who are internally battling unrest, because light naturally exposes what darkness tried to conceal. Did you know that sometimes the greatest offense to toxic people is seeing someone they expected to stay broken begin thriving without their approval? They may call you distant because you stop overextending yourself. They may call you selfish because you develop boundaries. They may accuse you of changing because you no longer tolerate unhealthy behavior. But what they are often reacting to is the loss of access, control, and emotional influence they once had. What I find insane is that many people claim that they want to see you healed until your healing changes your availability to their dysfunction. And that's when the resistance begins, because healing disrupts toxic patterns. Peace disrupts manipulation. Clarity disrupts confusion. And emotional maturity disrupts systems built on control. The truth is, some people bonded with the wounded version of you, but become uncomfortable with the healed version because the healed version no longer participates in the same cycles. And this is why moving forward in peace sometimes requires accepting that not everybody will celebrate your growth. Some people only knew how to connect with you through pain, chaos, dependency, or dysfunction. But when you begin walking in light, clarity, and emotional freedom, you are no longer feeding the atmosphere that kept those unhealthy cycles alive, and your peace becomes evidence that healing was possible all along. For me, one of the most frustrating things that happens when a person separates from toxic relationships is when other people try to rewrite their motives for them. Instead of listening to what the person is actually saying, people begin projecting narratives onto them. They say things like, "You're just hurt. You really want to reconcile. You'll come back eventually. You don't really mean that. You just need time." But what they're really doing, whether it be consciously or unconsciously, is refusing to accept that someone can fully see the dysfunction and make a peaceful decision to walk away from it permanently. Many people are uncomfortable with this finality. They reduce your clarity to temporary pain because admitting that you genuinely want to distance would force them to confront why the separation happened in the first place. Sometimes people cannot imagine peace outside of attachment because they were conditioned to believe endurance means permanent access, even when the relationship is destructive. But there is a difference between grieving a relationship and wanting to return to it. A person can mourn what happened, process the pain, tell their story, and still have absolutely no desire to reconnect with the environment that harmed them. That doesn't make us bitter. It doesn't make us unforgiving. And it does not mean that we are secretly hoping for reconciliation. It simply means we have accepted reality. And this is important because toxic systems often survive by erasing individual truth. They tell people how they really feel instead of listening to what they are actually communicating. Your experience becomes minimized. Your boundaries become reinterpreted. And your decisions become psychologized away as hurt, confusion, rebellion, or emotional reaction. But why? Because if people can redefine your clarity as instability, then they never have to fully respect your choice. There are also those people who romanticize reconciliation, no matter how damaging the relationship was. They treat reunion as automatically righteous, while ignoring whether their environment was healthy, accountable, truthful, or safe emotionally and mentally. But reconciliation without change often becomes re-entry into the same cycle. Some people know this from experience. They already tried the conversations. They tried forgiveness. They tried explaining themselves. They already tried giving second chances, third chances, and fourth chances. And at some point, we must create distance. It's not punishment. It's protection. And that's why telling our story matters, because silence often protects the system more than the person who was affected by it. And people sometimes become uncomfortable when someone speaks honestly, because once again, truthful stories disrupt carefully maintained family narratives. Once the scapegoat, or the truth teller, or the emotionally aware person begins explaining what really happened, others may rush in to reinterpret their motives. They say things like, "You're just emotional. You still love them deep down. You really want to fix things." But sometimes the truth is much simpler. Sometimes a person already made peace with letting go. Not out of hatred, not out of revenge, but because they finally realized that constantly returning to environments that destroy their peace is not wisdom. And people must learn to respect that your story belongs to you. You are allowed to explain your experiences without secretly wanting reconnection. You are allowed to heal without reopening old doors. You are allowed to move forward without carrying the expectation of reunion. And sometimes true healing is accepting that closure does not always come through reconciliation. Sometimes closure comes through clarity. The sad thing is that many people stay trapped because they were taught that boundaries are disrespectful. So they tolerate abuse to appear loyal. They silence discernment to avoid conflict. They sacrifice peace to maintain appearance. The family may say things like, "That's just how we are." "Stop being sensitive." "Why can't everybody get along?" But getting along in toxic systems usually means this: ignore the damage, protect the dysfunction, stay quiet about the abuse. Eventually, some people awaken. They begin noticing patterns. They begin protecting their peace. They stop explaining themselves. They stop participating in chaos. And suddenly the family accuses them of changing. But what really happened is this: the system lost access to someone it could once control emotionally. And toxic systems panic when they lose control. The moment you stop participating in dysfunction, the pressure increases. Now you're called distant, difficult, selfish, prideful, because toxic systems often punish the person who breaks the cycle. And they hate this because your boundaries expose what everyone has normalized. Sometimes the real battle is not learning how to fight people. It's learning how to stop feeding unhealthy cycles. Sometimes the real battle is not learning how to fight people. It's learning how to stop feeding unhealthy cycles. Not every door is meant to remain open forever. Not every relationship is sent to help you grow. Some connections exist only to test whether you will choose peace or familiarity. And many people never leave toxic systems because dysfunction feels more familiar than freedom. But healing begins the moment you stop worshiping false peace and start protecting the peace that the Most High gave you. The go along to get along society survives on silence, but healing begins with you. Thank you all for listening. May the Most High Baruch all deserving, and I truly hope that this message was edifying to your spirits. Remember Matthew 24:13, because we're going to need this as we go through these dark times. He that endures unto the end, the same shall be saved. And until my next video, Shalom.